Welcome to the CSIR on the auspicious occasion of the 75th anniversary. In this panel discussion, we will be talking about sustainable integrated security for the protection of complex operations. So as you will be well aware, internationally and both locally, we experience quite a number of security threats. For example, just in our region recently, we've experienced militant Islamist group who have beheaded in the order of 50 people. While this may appear to be somewhat distant from us, these things have a tendency to spread. For example, 250,000 people have been displaced by this particular incident. And so we need to pay attention to these incidents as they develop. In order to prepare for those kinds of incidents, we also need to develop concepts of operation for how we will deal with them so that we can maintain our operations within the kinds of organizations that we're dealing with. For example, in the context of SANParks, tourism and managing the natural resources, Transnet, the rail network system, or in the context of Department of Correctional Services, the inmates that are entrusted to them. So in the context of this ever-changing security, we need to be able to prepare and deal with this. So today I have three expert panelists, Major General Johan Jooste, the Chief Deputy Commissioner in the position of Government Information Technology Officer for the Department of Correctional Services, Ms. Mosupie, and then from the CSIR, Dr. Mateta Mokanyama, who will represent and discuss issues relating to the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, PRASA. So I'm going to ask, before we get started, three specific questions which the panelists will address. So the first question will be, what are the security threats in your particular environment or organization that are disrupting your operations? How is your organization improving security? And here, if you could perhaps discuss the particular concept of operations that's being considered for your organization, this being the processes, the people, and the technology that are being used, and what are the challenges in adopting or achieving integration? And then lastly, if you could perhaps discuss the key lessons that you've learned on this journey. Starting with Major General Jooste, I'm sure he almost needs no introduction in the realm of wildlife crime, but Major General Jooste is retired from the South African Army in 2006 after 35 years of active service. He's a war veteran, and the last part of his military career, he served in the Army General Staff in various capacities. In his second career, he spent 7 years with a multinational company in the military vehicle industry. In 2013, he was appointed as Commanding Officer Special Projects at SANParks, responsible for anti-poaching strategy, planning, and execution. He subsequently established a Wildlife Crime and Corruption Combating Coordination Center at the SANParks head office. He is currently employed by the Peace Parks Foundation and seconded to the Department of Environmental Affairs, where he manages a program to establish wildlife zones in all provinces. General, your answers to my questions, please.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Fellow panel members, viewers. My contribution today will be about our wildlife, about what we call environmental assets. Africa is the last cache of real wildlife on the planet. It's our heritage, and it's our economic engine through tourism. If we take tourism out of the equation, in Africa and in South Africa, it's a very bleak picture. So yes, there's the emotional thing, there's the heart of us as Africans with the assets that we're entrusted with. They're only there, and we are only giving patronship over them. We are there to protect these animals and plants and the soil that they graze on. The threat has always been there. It is about the stark have and have not. It's about hungry people that would harvest and sometimes plunder for meat, simply to get food, because they have no other options. Of late, however, over the past decade specifically, there's been a new turn of events with international crime syndicates organizing themselves for illegal wildlife trade. And that has caused great harm to our assets, and specifically the rhino that is so well known. We don't only talk rhino, but the rhino is a specific case. It is a specific case study almost in our obligation to protect our wildlife, to protect our environmental assets. It has become costly. The cost of ownership, the cost to own rhino has escalated. That, of course, affects the money available to do conservation. And that places stress on your income from tourism, which could have been used a lot wiser. The wildlife we find all over Africa, but mostly then what I refer to today is in national parks. We have 22. We have provincial parks. There are here and there a municipal park. And then, of course, we have private parks. Interestingly, half the rhino in South Africa belong to private owners and are protected by private security. And that is the complexity of the environment that we deal with. This threat is real and it's severe. We lost over the past decade about 10,000 rhino. Just more than half of Kruger's rhino was decimated, despite all our efforts. And thank heavens we did those efforts. We took those efforts. Otherwise, it would have been a lot more serious. The challenges further about protected areas is the reality of time and distance. These places are remote. It's not easy to protect them. We even have transfrontier parks where a park will partially be in South Africa and the other part will be in a neighboring country. In the east of our country, we have a peace park that includes Mozambique and southern Zimbabwe. And those are wonderful endeavors that add real value to conservation, to tourism, but also to security and good neighborliness. Dr. Panel members, like most things in life, we came to quite simple answers when we started evaluating this and started planning what will we do, how do we act decisively, how do we make sure that we don't only put a Band-Aid onto this wound. The hemorrhage is still there. Let me be clear. In Kruger, for instance, we couldn't normalize, but one could stabilize after a year or 3. The first fundamental truth is that you clear a park from the outside. The cause for this, you go look for in the consumer countries, mostly in Southeast Asia. You look at international criminal networks that permeates all of the international waters, airways, and land. You then come onto your own continent where we need to cooperate with the structures in the African Union. We come then into our own region where we must cooperate with the SADC structures. And you end up in your own country where you've got to have a coordinated effort with your law enforcement and intelligence agencies. And you ultimately end up around your parks with your communities. You've got to take them along on the journey. It's their wildlife also. And involve them best you can, but most importantly, give them options that they don't become the victim of being recruited into poaching because they have no other options. And then you're inside your park. Inside the park, we had to take extraordinary measures to protect. The key here is early warning. You have to be able to sense, to do surveillance, to get early warning, to do detection and tracking. Otherwise, the rangers will forever be just employed. And as it is, they stressed. As it is, inordinate resources go into them. And that green line must hold. So in the process of being more situational aware, we had to look, first of all, you look at connectivity. Connectivity in remote areas doesn't just happen. Because it's not as if you have Wi-Fi everywhere. It's not as if you can afford satellite connectivity. You don't have fiber. So often you have only microwave. But you have to be connected so that you can communicate. Once you can communicate, and that we learned the hard way, you utilize sensors. You want to get early warning through surveillance to make sure that you know where to send your rangers. It's for their safety that they're not surprised, they don't walk into an ambush, and it's to employ them wisely. and prudently. These sensors can range from radar, seismic, acoustic, and we've tested and used most of them, and including magnetic sensors. These sensors can be under the ground, on vegetation, on animals, on vehicles, and on aircraft. Now, that gives you an idea of what now is expected of a national park or a park to protect the wildlife. This is in a cloud, not an IT cloud, but this is in a cloud, remember. You have your security forces, you have your police with other responsibilities as well. You keep in mind your strategy says clear the park from the outside. But inside that park, it's our responsibility. It's happening on our beat as a Department of Environment, as a South African National Parks, as a private owner. If you have the connectivity, that doesn't come easy. You have the sensors, you've got to take it to an operations room without now calling it a war room necessarily, because you've got to coordinate that. And there, what we found very useful is a common operating platform, the CMOS system. You can imagine now with all your intelligence coming from your informers, from social media, from all these sensors, somebody's got to see that picture, be able to act on that and plan on that. And that is specifically what we've learned in terms of improving the situation and safeguarding our natural resources. It is evolving. The minute you do something, people, the poachers, the criminals adapt. They make other plans. And like throughout the world, they normally have the initiative. They choose the time and place. And the challenge was to empower a ranger corps to the extent that they can utilize technology, but that they can stand their bit against armed poachers repetitively plundering our resources. There was a time a few years ago when we lost 3 rhino a day in Kruger alone, when we would have 8 incursions, where you could have up to 12 teams of poachers in the Kruger National Park. Fortunately, we could get beyond that. Apart from protecting, you've got to be able to react. So we had to make ourselves mobile, either by foot, either by off-road vehicle, and by helicopter and other aircraft. You had to have mobility. And then we intelligently and responsibly had to get more proactive through informers, through working with the intelligence agencies, through working with neighboring countries, and not in a sinister way. Make sure that you have a flow of intelligence that will allow you to be proactive. Once they're inside your park, it's not a good place to be. It'll always happen, so you've got to be prepared for it. Doctor, in terms of lessons learned there were many. The one thing that's fundamental to our philosophy when we do technology makes things possible. Only people make it happen. Technology makes things possible, only people make it happen. You need technology. It will be silly to try and protect these vast areas without the use of technology. We have to pursue solutions, and we work closely with the CSIR and other industry worldwide to look at solutions. But ultimately, technology must be there to ensure that your rangers are more proactive, that they're better protected, that they understand what they're getting, that it's easy enough to maintain that the man-machine interface is well. The second thing is life cycle management, which is an elaborate term that just means what you have, you've got to manage, you've got to maintain it. You put a radar in a remote area in the bush, you must realize you have to maintain it. There must be people trained to do it. It's African conditions. We've seen so many pieces of equipment tested that just wouldn't function in the African bush. The African bush is harsh in more than one way. Second last, capability management. It's so easy to fall in the trap to either put down rangers, either put down infrastructure, like gates, or buy equipment without the systems thinking behind it to get that functioning as a system. And the level 6 system they talk about in engineering terms, where the people aspect is integrated so that you have a capability, not a product or anything else. And that capability talks to your concept of operations, and it is well technology-wise enabled. I think, in conclusion, we should not think that the 4th Industrial Revolution mustn't reach the bush, the protected area, the rangers. In various ways, whether it's in a smartphone, whether it's a camera trap, whether someday you can use a satellite to do observation or ensure communication, it can be utilized, and that industrial revolution must be put through to there. And then lastly, post-COVID, now that it's a time for austerity, certainly we must make sure that we drive the cost down continuously. And you will do that with appropriate, affordable, sustainable technology. Yes, there's a minimum number of boots on the ground and the rangers and other staff that you need, but you need now to seek out, to look for, to explore technology solutions to protect the asset of Africa without being emotional about it. Then if the heritage thing doesn't do it for you, maybe the economic engine thing and the tourism does it for you. Doctor, that in a nutshell, where we started with a dire situation, beginning of the previous decade. We're into the second decade of the so-called Rhino campaign, and we have every intention not to repeat that decade. And a part of it is capabilities, and a part of capabilities is the appropriate technologies that can enable, that can make us more proactive.
Thank you very much, General. I think you've shared some very pertinent insights learned over many years. And I think we'll get back to some of that in the questions. Now, if I may, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Mosupie. She is the Chief Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Correctional Services and has 25 years of experience in information technology, with a BSc cum laude from Medunsa, a higher diploma in computer science from WITS, and a master's in business leadership, majoring in e-business and technology management from UNISA. She has a strong track record in the preparation and alignment of information management and technologies, and with the development of strategic plans, business plans, and aligning those with budgets. She is skilled at identifying and evaluating new technology developments and creating solutions and determining their appropriateness for application in DCS. So perhaps, Ms. Mosupie, if I could have your thoughts on the questions that I posed earlier, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Doc. Good afternoon, everyone. And, in correctional services, security is core to our business because we need to ensure safety of our officials as well as of our offenders. And as well as rehabilitation, we are there to rehabilitate the offenders and also then reintegrate them into society. So security is paramount, and it's very important for us to have a secure environment. The security threats that we have currently would be your escapes. You need to ensure that we prevent and minimize escapes within our environment. We need to ensure that we minimize the flow of contrabands into our environment, and also making sure that the staff ratio to offenders is also balanced, because that determines your security and the threats that we might have. And cyber attacks are also a threat to our environment, where recently we'll have an exposure of our data and information of our officials into the market. So that poses a threat into our environment. So those are the key security threats that we have. And if those threats are not looked after or supported, then we have the instability into our environment. Obviously, there'll be riots, then there's instability into our environment, and you also kill the morale and the performance of our institution if you still have those threats. And you also pose a risk to both offenders and our officials within the correctional facilities if the threats are not combated. In your second question, how's your organization improving on those security aspects? we are dealing with a very, with a multi-level and multidisciplinary intervention that is required from leadership, from management, and from culture and structures, including our own facilities. We need to provide integration within our environment, capability, integration within our environment. We need to work together as an entity from ICT, from the structural, which is human resources, planning together our facilities, how they're built, how they're structured. We need to ensure that they are all in a form that is integrated. Otherwise, we won't achieve that. Governance. You know, people will think that governance is not important. And putting together a proper governance from your hierarchies, from your high-level officials to your lower-level officials, where people must understand what is enterprise governance of an environment. We need to have that enterprise governance. Secure communication and capability, as well as the SANParks are vast. We are also a national department. We have officers, we have correctional facilities in various areas within the society, within the country, into the most remote areas where really, if you don't have a secure communication capability, then your security will be compromised. You need to have an ability where your users at the bottom and are able to communicate to management in whatever form of way. So secure communication is very important. Security at a tactical level is very important. Your intelligence reporting, your ability to say that there's a threat in this area, these are the tactics that we need to apply in order for us to ensure that. So those are the things. What became important as we moved from being corrections to a rehabilitation center, the way your facilities are structured, the way your facilities are built becomes important, because within the rehabilitation programs, you offer variety of solutions and systems. You offer educational system, you offer health system, you offer all those systems. So while corrections was more of a punitive, right now it's a rehabilitation. You have to reintegrate the offenders into the society. So obviously during that process, you need to ensure that you have proper facilities that are geared to provide such services. So currently, those are the improvements that we are putting in place to ensure that there's security within the environment. Challenges to achieve the integration. We unfortunately still working in silos. We're still working as individuals where we don't see that process, people, and technology should be integrated and seen as one. We also have, we are comfortable, I think, into the way we are doing business today. So we need to have a tactic and a mindset change to ensure that we have integration that we are seeing in, or we want to see in the department. I think one of the other things that we have lack of forecasting. Say what's going to happen today, tomorrow, and 10 to up to 2068. We need to have that kind of forecasting. I think like everybody else, the pandemic caught us by surprise. We had to quickly readjust to our environment to ensure that we also secure, because in a closed environment that we have, the pandemic could spread easily throughout, but then we managed to control it. But we need to have a focus. What are the other things that we can have in the next 5, 10, or 20 years, that will ensure, that will create instability in our environment. So those are the things that challenges we have. Our communication channels are very lengthy as well, of which we need to bring back and ensure that we communicate easily. As much as we are demilitarized, hierarchy still plays a role in our environment. So if you want to have integration in certain things, you need to flatten the way you do things. You don't have to give away your ranks, but you need to flatten how you communicate, how you work with other officials, because your officials that are there have vast knowledge of the environment. They live within the environment. So you need to break out that. Reporting is very key, and it's a challenge that we have. We have to find a way of reporting on time and ensuring that we have the correct reporting structures within our environment. We still have the old way and a manual way of reporting, where data is still coming from our centers, aggregated into our management areas, into our regions, into national. So by the time you get a true sense of what's happening, it has gone through multiple levels that we need to ensure that we do. What has been the key lessons that we learned was saying that we need to look at forecasting and anticipation. Trends, we need to look at what our strategic intents are. We need to have early warning. I think General has mentioned that, and it's also applicable to our environment. We need to have that. We need to create a culture of resilience. We need to create a culture where if anything happens, then we know exactly what we do, how we do. And we also need to provide a network environment for specific assignments. As we said, we are hierarchical. So to break the hierarchy, we need to create an environment where we pull resources from various areas within our enterprise that will work and solve a specific problem. So currently we use rank to do certain things while we have officials that are capable of doing things. I think the next one, which will be improving communication and reducing the timelines. And then what became important, which is very critical, improve, modernize, and integrate automation. It's important. We always think that technology will solve everything, but technology will not solve everything. There are things that still requires interventions of human capital. Also, to invest in your human capital through training is important. And those are the lessons that we are actually even learning, that depend on we are an environment that depends on an official to do their work, because you have physical beings that are there. So to look after those, you need to retrain, reskill, move yourself from your saying that by automating, it will do everything for you. I think that's one of the lessons that we have done. So automation is part of our processes, but reskilling and training the officials in our environment on technology or anything that we have is very paramount. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, CDC. Again, I think you've shared some very important insights there. For the next panel member, I'd like to introduce Dr. Mteta Mokanyama. He leads the Transport Systems and Operations area at the CSIR. He works closely with the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa in a technical advisory capacity on transport operations. He's led the development of policies, models, and strategies for public transport service design and financing, and has a strong interest in improving customer-oriented service designs. He's registered with the Engineering Council of South Africa as a professional engineer. So perhaps if I could have your thoughts on the questions that I posed earlier, Doctor.
Yes, thank you very much. I think I want to approach it differently because a lot of the issues are quite common and the approaches are common. But I want to start, at a very interesting point, an eye-opening experience. When the PRASA services, the metro rail services, including long-distance services, were shut down with alert level 5, and then they were required to open in June, but eventually opened in July. We did a survey, the PRASA observations, customer surveys, and some customers would say, for the first time, I feel very valued because there was order, because people needed to be distanced. You needed to arrive, early at the station. The seating arrangements, there was order. The security that was deployed at the stations within the trains, very courteous. And customers were saying, we've never seen this kind of, service in metro rail. They felt very valued. And there was an eye-opening experience to say, we have systematically devalued life, right? Through practices. For the first time, some customers would see a very clean station, very clean toilets. So they appreciated that. And the level of, the staff morale was also uplifted because, staff were being recognized for the good work that they were doing. So that definitely was an eye-opening experience, which means that, we need to value whatever we're doing in PRASA, in services that we offer. We need the central or the departure point must be we value life, and therefore we are going to provide, these things. Now, if you take a few steps back, I look at a bit of history. The devaluing, what we're seeing now happening in the network, the rail network, it didn't just happen now. It was in the making for a very long time. In the early 90s, there were many people killed. They've been thrown off the trains. And we see it in the numbers. If you look at the trends, the passenger numbers, in the 90s, there was a dip because trains were, platforms where people were being killed for political reasons. There were quite a, South Africa was going through quite a bit of transition at the time. So a lot of blood was spilled on the networks. And in fact, thinking about it, we never actually reconciled, and said, we need to start afresh. So this lockdown has provided part of that, restart. Let's restart this thing. Let's rebuild. And in fact, I remember when the administrator of PRASA appointed to, turn around the service, announced, in March that let's shut down the service before even the regulations, required the service to shut. He said, let's shut down this service so that we can start afresh. Some of us said, no, we can't do that. No, but we eventually did that. So we needed to start afresh. It was history. It was in the making from a historical perspective. A lot of blood was shed, but not only for rail. It is the transport network. We kill around 15,000 people on our roads. We spend, the road accident fund is budgeted for to the tune of 45 to 50 billion, and that's not even enough, 50 billion rand per annum. The road accidents costs in the region of 150 billion. We estimated 50 billion to the economy. So safety and security in transport networks is costing the economy a lot of money. Now, coming back to PRASA, the budget that is there to combat is very little relative to the kind of, the magnitude of the problem that is there. I've just given you the example of road accident fund. We spent in the region of, we budget about 50 billion, but for PRASA, it's a couple of billions. Recently, PRASA got just about 900,000 to implement its safety and security plan, from National Treasury. Now, given the magnitude of the problem that we have, that is really insufficient. So we need to think about how we budget operationally for safety and security, because we value life, because we value the employees. I mean, you hear reports of trains being hijacked. So we need a lot more in terms of operational budget to respond to the magnitude of the problem that is there. Now, there is one of the things that the administrator did was to look at the leadership of PRASA. Get very competent people to lead. One of the people that was brought on board was General Rakau. And he was given a clean slate to say, look at the situation, tell us what is it that we need to do. And he came up with a security plan that, of course, has to be approved by the rail safety regulator, because it's a very regulated environment. Part of that is to include or introduce e-guarding. And I hear, SANParks, is going there as well. E-guarding, to say, let's do this. For the first time, PRASA started to think broadly about this concept. And now, going into the future, there's going to be a phased approach to say that we used to rely on humans, guarding security contracts, but the value of that hasn't been as much. We're not getting much value. So let's phase out the complete reliance on human guarding and start introducing technology into the mix. So the plan accommodates for that. But also the plan looks at things more broadly. It says we need to look at the proactive things as well as the reactive things. Part of the proactive things is intelligence, bringing intelligence into this. Preventative measures, wall your infrastructure. And the way you wall it is not just an ordinary wall, it's a wall that has got some technology functionality in it, so that you are able to proactively act. All right. And then part of the, again, preventative measures is to to bring about ownership of the infrastructure in communities. So liaison and communication, right? Remember I said there is this issue of being devalued. So to say that we value you as a community, so that the ownership of the infrastructure is extended to the communities. So the strengthening of liaison office is part of that strategy, right? And then on the more reactive side of things, we need to strengthen part of the plan to strengthen the combat readiness, right? To make sure that the manpower that we have on the ground is deployed in line with the risk. So a risk-based deployment. Mm-hmm. So we've used GIS, Geographic Information System, to look at the volume of passengers flowing, the number of platforms that are there, the number of passengers who board at different stations, and make sure that the deployment is in relation to the level of risk that is there. But in terms of the lessons that are being learned, is that internally within the organization, you've got to be organized. you know, the control centers, I mean, it was a bit of a mess. They are old, you know, manual operations. You know, you have to use your own, you know, phone airtime to call, and all of that is being addressed. So professionalize the entire value chain, security value chain in the organization, from the top right down to the bottom. So it's something that is being addressed. Part of it, just lastly, is the operating model of the organization. The operating model of the organization has been reviewed to say that whatever we do is about adding value. Whatever we do is about the customer. And part of it was to publish what we call the passenger service charter. Security, safety and security is part of that. Delays, you know, timetable performance is part of that. Cleanliness, being given information. If a train is stuck, you need to be able to get information within a certain, you know, time frame. So all of that is being codified. And now you want to then embed it in the performance measurements. Make sure that at an executive level, at a managerial level, at an operational level, you know, everyone is being measured in terms of that customer value chain. So I believe that within PRASA, we're starting at a very low base, but things are changing in the right direction. The magnitude of change is not as, you know, fast as we would like it to be, but it is changing in the right direction. Perhaps maybe let me mention that, you know, under lockdown, complete level 5 in April, we had 175 incidents reported to SAPS of you know, theft, vandalism. You know, when the nation was under lockdown, everybody was in their homes. They couldn't. The criminals were still there. I mean, it's an average of about 5 to 6 incidents a day. You know, peak was about 470 or so, 470. Under lockdown, it means, you know, they were busy still. So, criminals are out there. And they are active, so the level of reaction, I mean, if you are able to go out under lockdown to an extent of, you know, vandalizing 175 incidents a month, it means that the magnitude of the problem is huge. So operationally, the budget that you have initially, of course, needs to match the nature of the problem that is the risk-based approach to it. Institutionally, make sure that you are ready to respond. Put the customer first. Just ensure that you convey a message that we value you, and you'll show it becomes organic. Okay. You'll realize the benefits.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mokanyama. I think quite a number of very good insights here. Perhaps I could ask the floor for some questions, if there are some. In the meantime, I'll ask a couple of questions regarding you know, this whole issue I've heard of how the early warning is an important component. You spoke of early warning. There was the concept of anticipation, and you spoke of intelligence as well. So I'd like to ask to what extent are we able to implement some of these changes that we're talking about here? What are the barriers? I would imagine that, you know, the way organizations are stuck in particular ways of doing things. And how do we get that to change? Because I would imagine that adoption of new technology can be quite a challenge. And perhaps you could share some experiences regarding that.
Thank you, Doctor. I think for us, the challenge is in terms of adoption. You still have the old-schooled officials that are there that were trained in a specific way, of which then adopting technology or using technology is still a challenge. We have solutions that are there that can provide early warning, but the utilization by the officials becomes an issue. If there's no benefit, if there's no motivation in using the technology, then it will continue to be an issue. So what is there and how do we have forecasting, early warning? How do we ensure that we have people? So one of the chain of things is communication, ability for the official at the lowest level to communicate an incident for us to have it all. So we need to create that platform, which is a journey for us to create such a platform. So those are the things that we have. Training and reskilling becomes very important, and the way and mind shift and the way that people need to look at how is technology going to assist them to do their jobs better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and on this early warning, systems, in PRASA in particular, when an incident happens, it goes beyond just the passengers. It goes to the tenants. I mean, look at Park Station. Park Station hosts a huge number of tenants. The police, of course, are there as well. Retail. So many more people, suffer. And in fact, one of the things that PRASA has been trying to do is to use the property portfolio to start paying for, to pay for the services. So early warning systems become important because if you don't do that, you lose revenue, you lose customers. And one of the things that we've been doing is to just do an audit on the call center. There are numbers that have been there, published. Some of them, you call, you see something you call, no one picks up the phone. So we've done an audit of that to get a sense of what works, what doesn't work. And the training of the call center, people to say, when you receive a call like this is what you do.
Okay.
So that is being done. So, the basics. A community member sees something happening, I should be able to call this number and know that, it's being attended to. So that is being cleaned up. But of course, we, part of why it's taking long is because of the procurement systems. And that is where, some of the things get stuck. There's a solution that can be deployed immediately, but you've got to go through quite a bit of, process to procure those functions.
Sorry, General, do you have any thoughts on this question?
Doctor, I think there's a big difference between inserting technology and embedding technology.
Yes.
You get hardware and software, but I always say you get wetware. Homo sapiens people. And we neglect that, and we've developed a term, and it's maybe a bit paternalistic, that says hand-holding. Let me hold your hand until the technology works for you and not you for the technology. Initially, many people. Some of them are semi-skilled, some of them are older or whatever. Let me hold your hand while we have this new thing just to get a feel. Once you realize what this can do for you, it's like that when you get your new smartphone. It's a new thing on your computer. You have a new shortcut, but you cannot use it. It's as simple as that. And we owe it to people to take them along. It's the fourth industrial revolution applied to specific circumstances to make sure that we take the wetware along on the journey. Exciting journey.
Thank you, thank you. Well, this has been some interesting thoughts that have been shared here, and I think it's, for many of us who've been working in this, we kind of lose perspective. We're used to some of these ideas, but when I see panelists talking about them, I'm again reminded of, how far we've come in developing some of these concepts and where we were. So thank you very much to the audience. It's been great to have you, and I hope you've enjoyed our conversation. Have a good day.